The Oakland Raiders Las Vegas NFL Stadium project has a giant shortfall. It's almost over a 30-year period, $1 billion. And I've made a blog post to explain in detail how I arrived at the numbers that were generated by a spreadsheet that I developed. But I created the spreadsheet based on the Southern Nevada Tourism and Infrastructure Committee's model, or SNTIC's model, that was developed by Jeremy Arguello, Las Vegas Sands, and the Majestic Realty Group with input from the Oakland Raiders, and presented to the SNTIC during the month of June through July of last year, and is now in the appendix of the SNTIC documents that you can see online at the SNTIC website, sntic.org. Now, what I was trying to do is solve what seemed to be a riddle to a number of people, including, most notably, Clark County Commission Chair Steve Sisolak, who said no one has a handle on how the Bank of America debt is going to impact, quote, this deal, unquote. I'm paraphrasing his statements. But at that point, I thought to myself, I'm going to go back in time, get the information, and make a spreadsheet. So I had time to do that and endeavored, and I state this one more time, and I'm going to say this again after I say it now, to replicate the numerical presentation that the SNTI staff created, and then quite literally park the two new numbers in that numerical representation in that spreadsheet, and then run it. But my objective was to make the presentation as simple as possible for anyone to understand. Nothing complicated. I'm happy to show the formulas and calculations. What I determined were two things. First of all, the overall deficit, the cash deficit, is almost $1 billion. In fact, let me show you real quick what it looks like on my spreadsheet. I'm going to go on live stream later tonight and give you a more detailed look. But right here, you can see it's 9 billion, 964,073,120. I apologize, folks. I was up until 3 in the morning on this thing, so I wanted to get it right. Okay, and that's total project operating cash flow. Now, I'll go up and you can get, I'm going to give you a cursory kind of idea of what you're looking at here. Okay, this is the total project cost, right? Construction, land, offsite infrastructure, transportation costs per SB1. That's the new one. That's the new addition, $450 million. That's the new addition. The Raiders didn't have this, and neither did, the SNTIC staff, consisting of Majestic, Las Vegas Sands, and the Raiders, didn't have this at the time. Funding sources, team investment, public investment, private investment, total funding sources are here. And then there's your shortfall, reflecting the fact that they haven't considered this cost, and they haven't. Estimated stadium revenues are here, as you can see. And basically, if you want to get your cash balance, you take your stadium revenues, okay, your total stadium revenue there, and then you subtract your expenses, you get your stadium net operating income. Then you've got your debt service and capital here, right? This is the combination of what the SNTIC staff put in as debt service of $12 million annually over the 30-year period. Why they do that, they didn't quite explain, but I added anyway. I can subtract it, and it wouldn't make much difference, to be frank with you. It would just be, instead of that, it would be $676 million. But the bottom line is, I combine the two, this one and the Bank of America loan, that's this, to get the $1.36 billion, all right? The capital expenditure is $75 million. Debt service and capital total, $1.111 billion. That gives you your free stadium operating cash flow here, okay? So, if you want to get your actual total project operating cash flow, that is B33 right there, right, minus B17, and there you are. Now, if you're wondering what would happen if I had taken that out, taken out the the calculation for the original debt and just included the Bank of America debt, right? Let's do that and see what we get. Why not? Why not? Do that. And voila. Okay, there we are. Now we have 676 million. And look, we have a better picture there. Free stadium operating cash flow of still negative. 154,073,000, and look at your total project operating cash flow. Okay, look at that, right? So the staff added in debt to their original picture, and if you include that debt over 30-year period, it gives you that. This gives you a bit more of a bite at the apple, but still it's negative. And the total project operating cash flow is still negative. It's $604 million. Okay? So the point that I'm making with this exercise is this, and it's a very simple one to understand. When Las Vegas Sands and Sheldon Adelson were involved in this project, they simply said, we'll pay for everything. Originally, the plan, the SNTIC documents show, and minutes show, and my recollection as well, was that state and local governments would pay for the transportation costs. Okay? But Craig Cavalier, the executive vice president of Majestic, said, we're all going to pay that. And then Robert Goldstein, the president of Las Vegas Sands, reiterated that they would pay for all costs above the public subsidy of $750 million. Craig Cavalier wanted a tax increment district, and originally that was part of the plan. There was even a special SNTIC document on tax increment financing districts and how they work. But that never made it to the final recommendations or to the law. Why? Because the politically sensitive SNTIC didn't want any more public money spent on the project than the $750 million. It was capped, and they were serious about that. Everything was fine as long as Mr. Adelson, worth $30 billion, was involved. And hiring lobbyists to strong arm and make deals with Nevada legislatures in the then Republican-controlled Nevada legislature. Now, up to that point, that week of October 10th through the 14th, no one had any idea that transportation costs were going to be anything more than maybe $150 million. And yet it was left to the Nevada Department of Transportation to determine what the stadium-specific costs would be. So on October 4th, they finished the study and put it out, but it was never released to the public until someone saw it on the 10th, but then it didn't make it to public view until the 14th, when it wound up in the Las Vegas Review-Journal. Ironically enough, the same publication owned by Sheldon Adelson. And that reported, hey, it's going to cost $900 million to make all of these stadium-specific transportation infrastructure improvements. Now, a number of projects had to be basically front-loaded and advanced, but the study failed to earmark, I repeat, failed to earmark any state source. And so then the Nevada legislature went ape on Twitter. A number of Senate members said, why didn't we see this before we voted in the Senate? Remember, on October 10th, the Nevada Senate passed SB 1. So there was an emergency meeting. The executive director of NDOT came down to basically say, these aren't going to affect the project costs. Well, he says that, right? But the language which completely belies his statements was put into the Southern Nevada Tourism and Infrastructure Act. And it says that off-site infrastructure costs must be paid by the developer, essentially under the direction of estimates by the Nevada Department of Transportation and other local jurisdictions. I'm paraphrasing, but it is section 29 2H. That's where that wording is, if memory serves. But my spreadsheet has the actual reference. I've referenced everything so that anyone can go back. The spreadsheet is linked below. Everyone can go back and look for themselves at what I'm talking about now, and research it for themselves. Now, the problem was that everything was fine as long as Mr. Adelson was in. He was going to pay for all of it. So no one really paid attention to that language, let alone this transportation cost. It was like, I will deal with it later. That was the overall attitude. But then, as you know, Mark Davis unintentionally insulted Mr. Adelson with his actions, and Adelson said, I don't like he's going behind my back, talking about going to Goldman and not working with me, and then working on this stadium lease proposal without my input, so I'm out. And when he dropped out, that changed everything and basically created what you see here. My point is that the $450 million is something that Mr. Adelson was very ready to pay for. But now that he's not there, Mr. Davis had to borrow $650 million plus interest. I didn't include the fees. And that adds to a negative picture. If you take a look at what SNTIC came up with for total stadium revenues and expenses, I didn't touch anything. I just advanced it 30 years. I didn't touch a thing. All right, some of you might be saying, how come I didn't take out the $12 million annual debt? I couldn't find a reference where that came from. But as you see, I was very willing to, remove it, and we can see what the picture looked like without it, right? And with the Bank of America debt. But that debt was there for a reason, but it wasn't completely explained. So I left it there. I left it alone. And that's not the $12 million that has anything to do with the hotel tax. No, that hotel tax is $750 million. Completely different. So you take that $12 million times, 30 years, you're sure as heck not going to do that, and I hope you know how to do your math. But the bottom line is, because of these two problems, the transportation costs not being accounted for, off-site infrastructure costs, and the $650 million loan, those two primary problems, you get this shortfall. It also points to the fact that the stadium isn't producing enough revenue, even with the number of events calculated to occur there, to have a deal that pencils out. It just doesn't work. It simply doesn't work. And no, I have not added the relocation fee at all. All right, stay tuned for more. Thank you.